We begin with homeless services in Clare, which are under increasing pressure with new figures showing more people than ever entering emergency accommodation. Joining me now is Shane Doody, Shannon Sinn Féin local area representative and a frontline worker in homeless services who's been strongly critical of how the system is operating in this county. Shane, good morning to you. Thanks for being with us on today's show.
Good morning, Alan. Thanks for having me on.
You have recently described the Homeless Action Team in Clare as not fit for purpose in its current form. What prompted you to make that statement?
Yeah, so I suppose I'd like to preface that statement as well with that it's not the fault of the Clare Homeless Action Team. It's the fault of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael who've under-resourced them. But it's the system which they are operating within, Alan, and it's the fact that there's a glaring gap in the provision there for people seeking to access emergency accommodation or people who are being made unexpectedly homeless. And there's really nowhere for them to turn, I suppose, in County Clare. The Homeless Action Team do Trojan work, and I really have to stress that they do really good work within the county and with their relevant stakeholders. But there's a gap there in the provision for people who are made unexpectedly homeless. And I suppose I know that from my time when I spent working in Deputy Donna McGettigan's office for a couple of months, and I saw that, each week that there was new cases presenting to the office, and they're all very complex in nature. And of course, there's kind of different contributing factors there, but it's the same problem all the time that, really there's nowhere for them to turn if they are seeking immediate emergency accommodation.
Yeah, so for those who are seeking immediate emergency accommodation or find themselves unexpectedly homeless, one of the problems you're highlighting is that the service is only contactable from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Monday to Friday. What does that mean in real terms for someone who becomes homeless outside those hours? What options, if any, do they have?
Well, in Clare, Alan, they have no options. So unfortunately, what tends to happen is people end up sleeping in their car if they have one, and if they're lucky enough to have a car, or they end up crowding into a family member's home or a friend's home, or they're couch surfing. It is completely unacceptable, that people have to resort to that. And, like I said, the Homeless Action Team do great work, but they still have to assess everyone, and they still have to then go and see is there space, let's say, in the emergency accommodation that is in Clare at the moment. And the emergency accommodation that we have in the county is already under pressure. And it's already, especially those specialised services, so like the family hubs and Clare Haven and stuff, they're often at capacity. And it's really hard then to, I suppose, find that space for people. So there's a massive gap when it comes to there. And we know that homelessness is rising nationally, and it stands at a stark figure of 16,734 people since December 2025, and that's a 13% rise since December 2024. So we know that this crisis is continuing to spiral, but there's no, I suppose, emergency response from the government in terms of this.
You work on the front line of homeless services in Clare. I mean, what kind of things are you seeing day to day, Shane, that can concern you the most? Have you found yourself in a situation speaking to people who have no options, aren't able to avail of the Homeless Action Team, and are at their wits' end as to what they're going to do? Are they very difficult situations, very difficult conversations?
Yeah, Alan, they are. And what I will say, the more and more time I spend, I suppose, working in these services and in my role as an area rep, the more disgusted I become on these people's behalf, because it's so frustrating for them. It's so frustrating, and you sometimes you can't help but feel a little bit powerless and helpless in trying to assist people to get into emergency accommodation. And then even within these services, the lack of hope is absolutely devastating for people. And it's hard, I suppose, to see for them to have hope when they are just languishing on waiting lists, and homes are slow to be built and they're slow to be moved on, and it's even slow for them to access emergency accommodation. So it's particularly heartbreaking when someone is living couch surfing or living in their car, and there's little you can do for them. So that's I'm absolutely disgusted on their behalf, to be honest.
I mean, anybody, Shane, who's homeless is a terrible situation, but particularly when it's the elderly or vulnerable, and there's a sharp increase amongst homeless older people in this county. We're also hearing about the likes of families, children entering emergency accommodation. Does this reflect what you're seeing locally, and how concerned are you, particularly for older people who at their stage of life would have assumed that they'd be fairly comfortable in their own homes.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose, like I said, each case is so complex in nature, and there's so many contributing factors, whether that be addiction, mental health, disability, age, or even the sudden death of like a family member or something. So each case is so complex, and like especially people who are more vulnerable, I mean, they're left to fend for themselves. And it's heartbreaking to see that, especially if someone has a medical condition and they're forced to live in their car, if someone's elderly and they're forced to live in their car, or, move into an overcrowded family home, it's a detriment to their health. It's a massive detriment to their mental health as well, their confidence, their self-esteem. There's so much that goes into that, and it's not a trauma-informed model of care that's operating at the moment within the county. And again, I'm stressing that the local authority and the homeless action team do great work, but the system is not trauma-informed, and it's not working for people at the moment. And what I would say is that all the TDs in this county, do their best. What I will say, they do their best, and they know well about the cases of people who are presenting homeless each week to them. And I know Deputy Donna McGettigan advocates a lot for people in terms of that. But I have to say as well, the government TDs are well aware of that, because I'm sure the people come to their clinics and their constituency offices outlining similar stories. So really, it's an indictment on the government, Alan, that this is being allowed to continue, and that this gap in provision is being allowed to continue here in Clare.
Yeah, I'm sure the other local TDs do or try and do as much as Donna's doing, but obviously you're pointing the finger at the parties they represent. And I mean, we see people who are in crisis, Shane, being advised to contact Gardaí out of hours, which strikes me as far from ideal, given we speak so often about the Gardaí needing more resources and personnel themselves, never mind having to assist people who find themselves in a situation where they're homeless.
Yeah, and this is why I'm calling for this out-of-hours service, and it's not like this hasn't been done before. This is, there's a similar type of service which is operating in Limerick, and it's operated through Novus in partnership with Limerick Homeless Action Team. And I've actually done a couple of shifts within that service myself, so I know how it operates. I know they're able to provide advice. They're able to provide trauma-informed model of care. They're able to signpost people to get access to accommodation. We really desperately need that in Clare, because we have people who are contacting us and who are saying, where's there to turn after the phones are off in the homeless action team in Clare and no one's answering emails. Where is their turn? And there's nowhere. There's nowhere for them to turn. And it's not appropriate, I suppose, to advise people to contact the guards, because, I mean, the guards are there to keep our town safe and our community safe and protect us from crime. They're not there to provide a trauma-informed model of care, and they're not there to provide social care to people, which is what we need here in Clare. And it's what you need. And we highlighted the fact that in many cases there could be many different contributing factors, including disability, including age and stuff like that. What people need is social care. They don't need an Gardaí Síochána, and that's what's missing here in this county.
You spoke there about adopting an out-of-hours model. Is that similar to the one that is in operation in Limerick? And if so, how successful has that been?
Well, yeah, it would be similar. And, it doesn't have to be the same scale, because obviously there's a difference there in the population. But we really desperately need that out-of-hours service. And it's so critical, I suppose, for homeless people in Limerick to have that and to have access to that, because they're able then, let's say, if they are choosing to sleep rough, and I'm using that word choosing kind of carefully there, but let's say if they are out in the streets voluntarily, that they can get access to things, like sanitary products and towels and sleeping bags and clothes and so on. So things like that are so vitally important for people, and especially when, like, we were just in winter there, and it gets really cold, and we saw that a lady died in Dublin because she was out in the street. So there's so much, I suppose, into that. And like I said, it's very complex. But we need that service there because, in my opinion anyways, it saves lives. And, when you have that safe, secure shelter, it can change someone's life, and it can give them the chance then to come back around if they do have difficulties, let's say with addiction or mental health or things like that. It gives them the chance then to access that social care or those mental health supports which they may desperately need.
The government may point to housing delivery figures, Shane. They may say, look, our housing strategy contains or includes instructions to councils to put long-term homeless families with children at the top of their housing lists. So I suppose, prioritising families is good, but if you're single and homeless, you might say, well, what about me?
Yeah, that's exactly it, Alan. And I suppose that, people who are single and who are homeless often kind of feel that they've been pushed to one side. And I understand prioritising families is brilliant. And, we should be building more family hubs for families who find themselves put into that, that desperate situation of finding themselves homeless. But at the same time, there are many single people out there who are facing homelessness or who are out on the streets. And, they also need that social care. They also need that safe, secure shelter. Now, the Irish Homeless Policy Group gave 10 key recommendations to the government last year. And one of them was ensuring that sufficient beds were in emergency accommodation. That is so desperately needed. It gives people the chance, like I said, then to access the support that they need, and then, being able to liaise with the homeless action teams to find them, maybe a more secure long-term accommodation, even own-door accommodation, which can prove to be very successful for people as well. They also highlighted the fact that we need to kind of improve access and transparency around emergency accommodation, and particularly refusals as well. But we need to bring in all the relevant stakeholders here. So, it's the housing charities who are working with the local authorities. It's the local authorities, but it's the government who needs to do this. And there needs to be the political will there to resource them. And also the Irish Homeless Policy Group outlined that we need about 60,000 homes a year. And this is what Sinn Féin is saying as well. And 15% of those need to be social and affordable housing.
You have been very critical of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, but how would Sinn Féin be able to do it differently? I mean, you've mentioned a number of things there that are required: additional hubs, additional beds and emergency accommodation. We need more housing. I mean, to be able to provide all of that and to hit 60,000 homes when recent housing figures, annual figures are well off that, how would Sinn Féin be able to achieve all of that?
Well, if I'm honest, I don't think the political will is there within Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael to solve the housing crisis. I mean, I know it's a topic that is often in the media and it's often discussed, but I actually don't think the political will is there within them. Like I said, it's the system within Clare that the Homeless Action Team is operating within, which is limiting what they can do and what they can provide. If they resource the local authorities to be able to provide accommodation, more emergency accommodation, and brought in the homeless charities into this as well, we can end voluntary homelessness in this country by 2030, and that is what the Irish Homeless Policy Group is saying. We can end this if they follow their recommendations, if they resource the local authorities. We can end this. And I suppose from the Sinn Féin perspective, we support all 10 recommendations that the Homeless Policy Group gave to the government prior to their programme for government, including building 60,000 homes a year and doing that through supporting small and medium-sized developers. And I'm also thinking about the new changes to the rent pressure zones, which will be coming through, which will be disastrous for people who are renting right now, and which will provide many loopholes for landlords to reset the rent to market value after the tenancy ends.
We reached out to the council for a statement on this. It says Clare County Council's Homeless Action Team can be contacted between 9am and 5pm Monday to Friday for any emergencies outside of these hours. Contact can be made with the council's emergency number 087 2599 568, and advice and guidance regarding available supports will be offered. Clare County Council and Limerick City and County Council work together as part of the Midwest Region Homeless Team and are currently jointly finalising a new homeless action plan for 2026 to 2030. Goes on to say the plan is strongly informed by projected needs for the next 5 years, both in terms of numbers and services, including new and or extended services as required. Input has been sought and received from agencies which form the Midwest Regional Homeless Forum, and the experience of these agencies is invaluable in preparing for the future. The draft plan will be brought before the Midwest Homeless Strategic Management Team and SPCs of both Clare County Council and Limerick City and County Council in the coming months, and subsequently will be put before the elected members of both councils for consideration. Just before we finish, Shane, your brief response to that, I suppose it does highlight they can be contacted 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, which is better than 9 to 1, albeit I suppose it's still, there is the point that if someone finds themselves homeless outside of those hours, that there's an issue there.
Well, I suppose they still need to assess that person, and there is no service, low threshold, safe, secure service there for people who need immediate accommodation. And that's what we need in Clare.
Okay, we have to leave it there, Shane. Thank you very much for being with us on this morning's show. That is Shane Doody, Shannon's Sinn Féin local area representative on the Homeless Action Team in Clare.